everyone. My name is Michael Redaway. I am a student at Tiffin University. This is my final assignment for DEC 400, My Community Issue. My community issue is that the City of Cleveland's Police Department, or CPD, is dangerously undermanned, and that if it does not change soon, Cleveland will go from being a place with good areas and bad areas to areas that are chaotic and lawless. The primary source for this interview is someone that is an anonymous source inside of CPD. This person requested to stay anonymous, and I will honor their wishes. When I was in the military, there was a big belief in preaching the basics, or the fundamentals. In a lot of TV shows and movies, we get into the person asks the crazy question that comes out of nowhere that solves the case. A lot of that, unfortunately, that's not reality. Reality is you stick to the basics, and the basics are who, what, when, where, how, and why of any issue. That's what was taught to me, and that's what's worked best so far in my career in law enforcement. I've been in law enforcement for over a decade now, and this is how we ask questions and try to get answers from whoever we're interviewing, whether it's an interrogation or where we're talking to a suspect, or where it's just an interview where we're talking to a witness or maybe even potentially a victim. So primary interview here is the main question: why is there such a difficulty for Cleveland Police Department to fill their ranks? And what the source basically broke down was, throughout this interview, that it's a twofold problem. The first problem is people just don't want to be police officers anymore. It's not worth the aggravation. There's a lot of negative stigmas on cops right now, and that's one side of it. He explained the other side of it is that academy classes have gone down drastically, and that the suburbs up here in Cleveland, they tend to try to steal the top talent. So I asked my anonymous source about to explain to me the process with the academy. And he said, with the academy, the suburbs are hunting for the top guys. Because like the NFL, like the NBA, like Major League Baseball, there's a tier system. And you have your top tiers and your bottom tier cadets. And when this happened in the past, when we had 200 people graduating and all of them wanting to become cops, it didn't matter if the suburbs picked off the top 5 guys or the top 10 guys, because you had 190 guys to pick from. The issue now is we're getting graduating classes that are 25 people, 30 people, and Cleveland's significantly undermanned. So when the suburbs come by and they take, 5 guys or 3 guys or 4 guys, that makes a huge impact, and it really hurts. I asked if Cleveland was doing anything to try to stop this from happening, and his response was that they have something in place that they're trying to do, where if an officer wants to leave and go become a police officer somewhere else, like in the suburbs, and basically the cadet knows what he's doing. The cadet has hustled the system. He's gone through the academy. He's been trained. He knows what he knows what he's doing. And the police department, the CPD, knows what he's doing too. So they have a $25,000 fine in place where the cadet has to pay $25,000 to the department for training him. In the past, this worked, but the suburbs realized, the suburban police departments realized, well, we'll just give that cadet a check for $25,000, have the cadet go, give it to CPD, everything's on the up and up, and now they're leaving. And the sad thing is that cadet is going to, even with that $25,000 hit being taken off his salary in the first year, that cadet is still going to make more money than his classmate who's graduated and who has become an officer with the Cleveland Police Department, with CPD, still going to make more money than him. And that's a problem. I asked the source what we can do to stop this, because this is a terrible trend and it's very dangerous. And the source told me, I don't see how we can stop this. We don't have the money to stop top-tier cadets from leaving, and the union is more worried about current cops on the payroll. The reason why they're more worried about current cops on the payroll is because at any point in time, 200 police officers can put their papers in to retire today, right now. By next year, it'll be 300 officers. And there's no way that the city of Cleveland is going to be able to function with 300 cops all retiring at once. The city is struggling to function right now with the manning that we're at now. We can't afford to lose 100 cops, or 200, or 300. I also asked the source, how does the lack of manning impact violent crimes and units that deal with violent crimes like rape, murder, assault, human trafficking? And I asked the source, do you have special units so where a manning shortage does not matter for those crimes? And he explained that there absolutely matters, and that the lack of manning means people that are detectives or could be detectives, they're now on the road because we have patrolmen working 16-hour shifts, and these guys are working all the time, sometimes 6-7 days a week. Now, before we get to the primary point of view, let's get to the opposite point of view. The opposite point of view is the idea of less is more. There's a portion of the population that believes that there are too many police officers right now. Culturally, there are a lot of minorities that are not fans of the police due to the past history with police abuse and police brutality. Much of the negative stigma comes from social media and people capturing what happens on camera via technology. Everybody, if you have a phone now, you have a camera. You have the ability to record. In the past situations, police officers and civilians, especially ones where the civilian has died, has sparked many anti-police campaigns. Most notably, George Floyd, where a man who claimed to be a cop kneeled on his neck for over 8 minutes and ended up killing the man, strangling him to death. Stuff like that wasn't seen in the past. And because it was more or less an out of sight, out of mind type of scenario, the police were able to kind of get away with some stuff like that. Now, there is no getting away with that. Now, there's a camera on you 24/7. Other main points for the opposite perspective is that fewer cops means it's less likely for there to be incidents between cops and civilians. That's true. Less numbers, less people are going to be wearing the badge, less possibilities for cops and civilians to have issues, to have mix-ups. Agencies are also making it a point with there's a negative stigma with defund the police, and that stigma is that they're just going to take money away from the police department. They're abolishing the police. Now, there are cities that have abolished the police, most notably Minneapolis. It hasn't gone well for them, by the way. And that's different. Defund the police is where you take a small percentage of which would give the police and funding from the city, and you fund it into social programs. And there has been varying levels of success with this program. So a lot of social programs, for example, would involve making sure that mental health workers are on around the clock 24/7, only calling the police to certain situations where there may be a criminal element to it. Those are the main points with defund the police. Now, the primary point of view is we need more cops. We absolutely need more police. And the problem with the defund the police issue first is, less is more. You're going to have less likelihood for issues, for problems between civilians and police officers. But guess what? Your response time is also going to be significantly affected. So when you dial 911 and you end up on hold, it's a pretty lonely feeling. It's a pretty scary feeling. Or when you call 911 and you get a busy signal, people don't want that to happen. Unfortunately, that's reality, and that's what does happen. Another problem with the less is more theory is that when confronted with crime numbers going up, the excuse is that the social experiment is going to take time. Unfortunately, Cleveland doesn't have that time. If you look at our homicide numbers the last 3 years, they've gone up consistently. They're finally starting to come down in certain areas, in certain neighborhoods, but there's other neighborhoods where we're seeing 100% increase in crime. Cleveland is considered to be safer than 2% of the cities inside the United States, and that is terrible. The idea that 98% of the country is safer than Cleveland. That's not gonna work for us in the future. These are examples of escalating violence in the city of Cleveland. And as you can see, 3 out of 4 of these have all happened this year. And most notably is the one I want to highlight here is this part right here. That only 60% of the city's homicides were cleared. Now, that's over a 10-year period. So this isn't a 1-year, 2-year thing. Oh my, you're overlooking things, you're overstating this, you're blowing something out of proportion. No, this right here is a 10-year period. That guy right there, boom, 10-year period. So we're not talking about something that's happened over 1 or 2 or even a 3-year period where homicide numbers have gone through the roof. We're talking about 10 years and only 60% of the homicides in a major city being cleared. That has to change. That's terrible. Other major criminal elements with the police shortage. Now, it's common for criminal underworld organizations to have a financial edge on local law enforcement because you're dealing with international organizations fighting against local organizations. So they're going to have a deeper resource pool to grab from. That's fine. That's been part of life. There was a time where the mob was making more money than the United States was. It happens where there was an era actually after the Civil War, in fact, where the Pinkerton Security Company had more people in it than the United States Army did. So, and by the way, there was a massacre that happened there too. So, underworld organizations, criminal organizations having a financial edge on local law enforcement, it's always been a thing. Nothing new there. But the reason why law enforcement can be successful against these criminal underworld organizations is that typically in a condensed area, law enforcement has more manpower. If there's 300 cops inside the city of Cleveland, there's not going to be 300 guys from the mafia in Cleveland. There's not going to be 300 guys from the drug cartels in Cleveland. If there's 400 cops, there's not going to be 500 guys from the cartel here. It's not going to happen. Where things get catastrophic is when, like in Mexico, for example, the drug cartels have just as many, if not more people. They have more people than the police. And the police and the army, they're called the federales down there, are pretty much the same thing. So this is where things can get very dangerous here in Cleveland in the immediate future. You have 300 cops off the street in the next year or in the next 2 years, and we're not filling up those numbers. Well, there's who's to stop criminals from doing whatever they want. An example of when I say catastrophic, here's an example. Mexico's had in 2019 34,500 homicides. Okay? Now, to put that number of 34,500 homicides in perspective, the United States has only had 24,576. But Mexico's population is 126 to 128 million people. We have over 331 million people. They almost double their number. We have a huge number. It's almost double. It's almost double, and they had 10,000 more homicides than we do. And that's because the drug cartels already have more money than the police down there, and they have more manpower. We don't want that to happen in Cleveland. We can't afford for something like that to happen. Another major issue in Cleveland has always been human trafficking. John Taylor, a former Navy police officer and anti-human trafficking task force officer, explained to me during an interview that traffickers will move people like cattle and have their victims contained in an isolated area called hubs. And these hubs are usually where there is little to no police or law enforcement presence because the traffickers need a safe place to store the victims where they don't have to worry about getting raided all the time. He told me to look out for big arrests because it means an area is already a hub and the traffickers are moving on, or the location is about to become a hub or already is a hub. And sure enough, last year, there was, right after he said this to me, because this was an interview taken from 2021, we had 161 people arrested in the sex sting operation. So, if Cleveland is already a hub or is becoming a hub, we need more law enforcement to combat these because, personally, I know slavery has been around since the beginning of time as part of the human condition. I just don't want that human condition being maximized and victims being taken advantage of inside this city. Now, for the conclusion, it was time to put everything together and to look for solutions that are short-term and long-term for the Cleveland Police Department to solve their manning problems. First, you have to give these guys more money. Raise salary to be competitive with the suburbs. Now, in the current political climate that we are in right now, raising taxes on everyone is not going to happen. To give more money to the police, that's not what people are looking to do. It's just not going to happen, okay? Now, what we can do is raise sin tax and then also raise tax on the population inside Cuyahoga County. So those suburbs that are stealing Cleveland Police Department's talent, those guys making more than $250,000 a year annually are going to get hit. Then I would also go and talk to the governor and explain the situation that we're in and see about getting those adjoining counties to also pay a tax for people that make more than $250,000 a year, because their counties are also people are using our resources and are stealing our top tier cadets. That's the other way I would try to attack this. So I'd start small, and right away in Cuyahoga County, that's where you're going to see that sin tax, and you're going to see a raise on taxes for people who make more than $250,000 a year. Then, if that doesn't solve the main issue, go to the governor's office, go to the Ohio General Assembly, which is like for us on the state level. That's our Congress, and also tax them with people that make tax and see about getting those people in those counties that make more than $250,000 a year, get them taxed as well. Then, instead of a $25,000 fine to leave the department early and to swim the better shores, as some would say, I would triple that fine. I'd make it $75,000, making it where if officers want to leave, that first year, essentially, you want to leave, that's fine, but you're not making any money. Your department that's going to cut that quick $25,000 check may not be, and then just take it out of your salary. I don't know how quickly they're going to be to cut you a $75,000 check. So essentially, officers are going to have to stay at least that first year, maybe those first 2 years before they leave, because who's going to want to pay $75,000 per officer? Finally, I would ask my cadets to sign a waiver committing to 2 years of service with the Cleveland Police Department. My initial idea was a non-compete clause. We see this in certain companies where that are very competitive. They'll have a non-compete clause in someone's contract where they have to wait a certain amount of time before they can leave to go somewhere else. That's not possible because the certification that cadets get when they become police officers is from an organization called OPATA, and OPATA is a state-ran program. It's a state-ran certification. So there's no way for a local department like Cleveland to go, okay, you guys want to do this to us? Well, this is what we're going to do, and we're taking away your certification. Now, they can fire you. Now, the police department can't fire you for misconduct and take your certification away. But that only happens if you did something wrong. That can't happen because you want to leave and go to another department. So, those rounding everything up and concluding everything, those are my plans. This is what I would do. I would triple that fine, make it $75,000, where in fact the officer might be end up losing money, or the department that's paying him off or her off so that they can get that top cadet, they end up it affects them and they end up hurting money. That ends up hurting them. Next, initially, I would make sure to I'd be raising the sin tax and then raising tax on the population inside of Cuyahoga County for anyone that makes more than $250,000 a year. Small percentage, small bump there, gets more money and that's where we use that money to hire more police officers and to raise wages for cops so that they make more money. Finally, if that doesn't do it, then you go to the state level to get the adjoining counties because they're just as guilty. And then finally, ask for a commitment and see if you can get a commitment from guys. Here's my references. Thank you very much. Have a good day.